Okay, so I'm going to use my retouch image to now go on to colorize this image. So I'm just going to, at the moment you can see I've opened it again, it's called Retouch PSD from the last one. And I'm going to say File, Save As, and I'm going to call this one Colourise. Going into the same folder with everything else that I've been making, and I'm going to save it. So say OK to that. Now you can see this one is called Colourise, not Retouch. And the retouch one is in my folder. It's safe. It's not being changed. This is a copy of it called Colourise. So I'm going to go from there. So you can see along the top here it says Colourise.psd at 321%. That's just how much I'm zoomed in it. Retouch. I think it was the original file now. What's the name of the layer that I'm currently on? You can see it over there. And it's called it's RGB. I won't worry about the ATA for the moment, but RGB means that it's red, green, and blue. It's a color image, even though it looks black and white. If it said grayscale in there, you would have to go Image, Mode, RGB, because it would mean that any color that you put on this, if it was grayscale, would just come in as shades of gray. It wouldn't be colors. So let's get started on colorizing this one. So as before, I want to preserve this layer. So I want to make a copy of it. So I can, a few ways I can do that. I can say layer, duplicate layer. That will work. Over here in the layers palette, you can see over here there's a little line of button, or a few lines here. Button, open that up and you can duplicate a layer in there. Down at the bottom here, this is called your new layer icon. If I click on that, it makes a new layer. I don't really want that at the moment, but I'll show you the reason why is, yeah, delete that. If I drag retouch into the new layer icon here, it makes a copy. That's the one that I use. That's the quickest way. You just drag the layer into the new layer and it makes a copy of it. And I'm just going to click on this and I'm going to call it Colourise. Now, I don't really need to do this, but I want you to get into the habit of duplicating layers. I'm not doing everything on the same layer if you don't have to. Because anything I do to this is going to be on the layer above. So this doesn't really matter at this point. But I just want to show you that you can duplicate layers if you need to. If you're going to affect a layer, you might want to make a copy of it before you do anything to it. So if I want to delete that layer, because I don't actually need it, I'm going to hit that. Delete the Colourise layer. And this is a folder, a file called Colourise. I have one called Retouch, one called Colourise, and so this will be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new blank layer on top of that. And I'm going to call this layer Coat. Right? So I just double click on the word layer 1 or whatever it was, and I type in what I want. Again, you don't have to do that, but it just means that when you're looking, say if you have 50 layers in here, you want to find out which one is which. If you don't label them, you end up kind of switching things on and off to see where they are on the screen and what goes away and what comes back. That's how you're trying to hunt it down, So this layer is called Coat. Over here, I'm going to choose Paintbrush or the brush tool. Now there's one down here called History brush, which restores part of an image to an earlier state. We don't want that. It looks the same. I really wish it didn't, because sometimes students pick that one and what they want is that one. So brush tool, and you can see beside it in the little image there, it says brush tool brackets B, right? So at the moment I am on the spot healing brush, which is there, which is the shortcut J. If I choose B, you'll see this tool here change to this one below it. So B changes to one below it. J is the one above, switches back. So your keyboard shortcuts can be very useful, but not everyone uses them. Now, this brush is huge. So I'm going to the right of the brackets, the right of the letter P on your keyboard are the two brackets. I'm going to bring that down. And you can see up here that it's got a soft edge to it. And let's give them a nice blue jacket, right? So this is going to look bad before it looks slightly less bad, shall we say. Because this is a technique about colorizing black and white photographs. And never really caught on. I'm going to show you some really good examples of it that take a lot of time and artistic skill to achieve, but we're not aiming for that level. That's not what we're doing Photoshop for. So people use Photoshop for a variety of reasons. I'm going to make this brush a bit bigger to fill in those big chunks. And right, so up here, you can see there I shot off the edge of his shoulder there, but that's okay because I'm on a separate layer for it, so I don't have to be so precise. I'm not painting on his jacket, I'm painting on a layer above his jacket. So you can see over here, coat, big blue splodge on it. So far so rubbish. It does not look like a real blue jacket at all. But this is a thing called blending modes. And blending modes is how one layer affects the layers below it. At the moment I have a stack. I've got my background white layer. Let's switch everything off. Background white layer. That's the original that I brought in. Then I retouched it. And now up here I've put a layer on to colorize the one below it. But it's just a solid block of blue. So up here where it says normal, these are your blending modes. Now they all do different things, but really if you understand the concept of blending modes and that you change the blending mode and it affects the layer below it. I'm going to switch this to overlay. And now instead of a solid blue block, it becomes a transparent blue block. Slightly better. Over here, you've got a thing called opacity, which is how see-through it is. If I bring that down, you start to see it's become a bit more subtle now. So I go to about there, maybe. Well, there's no right or wrong with this. It's just what you like, you know. So I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger, and I'm going to switch to the eraser. And the brush is quite small there, so I'm going to bring that up. And you can see over here, it's a hard edge, that brush. I want to erase with a soft edge, so that you don't see a harsh line where you've erased something. And I'm just going to get rid of the blue that went over his shoulder there. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call it hair. Okay, this time I'm going to choose like maybe greeny brown, isn't it? So I'm going to choose. This is the thing with color choices and stuff like that. With certain colors, there's a. Have you ever said to somebody, "Oh, I really like your nice blue shirt," and they went, "Oh, you mean my green shirt?" Because you will interpret blue and green differently to someone else maybe. And so if you look at this is the color spectrum, right? Or all the way through the visible color spectrum. There's no brown on that spectrum. Brown is a color that exists in relation to other colors, right? So you would to some people certain browns look green. It starts to cross over into that territory, and you can see down here in the orange where I'm choosing a brown color from. It's pretty close to green, you know, and blue is pretty close to green as well. So in those areas, that's where we kind of get the most. You have to interpret a color. Your brain interprets a color. That's green, and I might go, no, it's blue. Anyway, this is so. I'm going to choose a color down here, and up here I'm going to start painting. Its blend mode is set to normal now, but I can switch it in advance and just start painting with it in a blend mode. Maybe it's not too dark, too bright a color. Oh yeah, I'm still on the eraser. That's what it is. I need to go to brush. So if your tools aren't working the way you expect, just have a look over at the toolbar and see that you're on the right tool, because I had just changed to the eraser but hadn't changed it back. No. Hair is difficult because it has there's a point where hair fades towards the skin, and see I'm getting this very harsh line which you wouldn't normally get. So let's say, actually, you know what, that's rubbish. I'm going to bin that layer. Or what I can do is I can just go back to my eraser and erase the whole thing. Now if you look here, I'm erasing all the hair color that I put in. If I go down to his jacket and try and erase it, nothing happens because the jacket's on a different layer. If I'm erasing something, it only happens on the layer that I'm looking at. I'm going to bring that brush all the way down, and over here I'm going to bring its size up quite a bit. Now I should have a softer edge to what I'm doing. But, you know, it's never going to look real with this level of work put into it. Really what we're just doing, this isn't about colorizing images, this is about understanding blend modes and how this layer affects the one below it. In this case, the one below it has a transparent space, but then it affects down here. It's not affecting this one because this one is in front of it. But if I took that one away, it would be on that layer. So I just switched it off there. So remember, switching something on and off is not the same as selecting it. That's selecting it. That's turning it off. That's selecting it, and it's on or off here, you know? So that's his hair. Let's go one more, new layer, and we'll call this one face. Now, I'm going to switch its blend mode to overlay. And I'm going to try and find a flesh tone in here, which can be very difficult to do. So let's go over here. Now, when you're painting in blend mode and overlay mode, basically what you're doing, you're adding color here, and if there's detail below it, it will react to that color. If there's no detail, if it's very white or close to white, there'll be very little reaction to it. So I'm going to start painting this. You see, it's starting to look a bit creepy now. All right, so make my brush a bit bigger. Now I'm going to dial this back a bit in a minute. The skin is very difficult to do. And then the examples I'll show you of this stuff done at a really high standard, at a really high level, you'll see a huge difference. So that does not look right, and I didn't think it would. Here's what I can do. I can go back to my opacity. I can dial that back a little bit to there, maybe. And then if I switch it on and off. Now, what will make a difference, I'm going to have the magnifying glass here, and I'm going to zoom in on the eyes. And with my eraser, which is here, I'll just make my brush smaller. Because now his eyes, I'm going to erase the paint that I painted over his eyes. And I'll make another layer. And I'll call that eyes. We'll switch it to overlay straight away. And then we'll use our paintbrush. Add a color. Let's give them nice. Blue eyes tend to stand out a little bit more. Bring my brush size down with the brackets beside the letter P. Now there's supernatural blue eyes. Nobody has eyes that color. Let's drop them down a bit and go to View, Fit on Screen. It's not perfect, far from it, but really I'm not showing you how to colorize photographs. I'm just using it as a way to show you how to overlay color on top of something and how to get one layer to interact with a layer below it. So these are kind of Photoshop basics. And really it's about blend modes and layers. Layers are very important in Photoshop. It's what kind of sets it aside from basic drawing packages. So I'm going to say it's already saved as Colourise. So if I say File and Save, it's saved. Then I can say Photoshop, quit. It doesn't ask me to save. That means it already has. If it did ask, you would just say yes, and that's it. So I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.